I still can't shake the feeling that something's watching me. It's been weeks since that road trip, but every time I drive at night, my hands start to sweat and my pulse quickens. The headlights, the road signs, the hum of the engine, it all comes rushing back. I never thought a simple trip could end up like this. It started with just the three of us, me, Jake, and Sarah. We'd been friends since college, and it was supposed to be just another weekend adventure, a road trip through the back roads of Nevada, away from the grind of our usual lives. We had the windows down, the music playing loud, and the open road ahead. We were on our way to see a secluded spot Sarah had heard about, a perfect place to get some time away from everything. But the first sign something wasn't right came at the gas station. It was late, maybe 11 p.m. or so, and the station was eerily quiet. Just a few old trucks parked at the pumps, some guy in a weathered hat inside, and the distant sound of wind blowing through the desert. The kind of silence that felt like something was waiting for us. Sarah went inside to grab some snacks, while Jake and I stayed by the car, joking around. That's when we saw him. A man, dark, grizzled, and in a coat that looked way too heavy for the warm night, walked slowly past us. He didn't say anything, just kept walking like he had all the time in the world. His eyes, pale, almost white, met mine for a split second. I could tell Jake noticed it too because he stiffened beside me. But the guy kept moving, heading off toward the road. "Did you see that?" Jake asked quietly. "Yeah," I muttered. "Weird." I wasn't sure what was off about him, but I knew something didn't feel right. Sarah came back and we got back in the car, but as we pulled away, something odd happened. The guy was standing on the side of the road, staring at us as we passed, unmoving. I could still feel his gaze, even as we sped away. It was like he was waiting for us to leave, waiting for the right moment. We didn't talk much after that, the mood in the car had shifted. But we continued, even though I had the feeling in the pit of my stomach that we should have turned back. When we took that last detour, that's when everything started to unravel. We had driven off the main highway, heading onto some old, barely paved road that Sarah insisted was a shortcut. She'd found it on some obscure travel blog that promised hidden gems in the Nevada wilderness. It seemed harmless enough at the time, just a few miles more before we'd reach our destination. But now, in hindsight, I wish we'd never taken that route. The road was tight, winding through thick patches of desert and scrub. The trees on either side of the car were sparse, but their shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long in the dim light. The kind of dark that made you squint, as if trying to make sense of the shape of the world around you. The headlights of our car flickered once, and for a moment, I thought we were going to lose power entirely. Jake grumbled from the back seat, "This is stupid. Should have just stuck to the main road." But Sarah was insistent. "Come on, guys, it's an adventure. Relax." I wasn't sure why, but the further we went down that road, the more something about it didn't sit right with me. The air grew heavier, the wind died down to a weird, uncomfortable stillness, and I could swear I saw shadows moving in the trees at the edges of the headlights. That's when we saw it, just as we rounded a sharp curve, there was an old truck parked in the middle of the road. It wasn't a regular truck. It looked like it had been sitting there for years, rusted, with peeling paint and a cracked windshield. The kind of vehicle that no one would leave in the middle of nowhere unless something was very wrong. "Is anyone in there?" Sarah asked, peering out the window. "I don't know, but we're not stopping to find out," Jake said. But before we could even think about turning around, a figure emerged from behind the truck. At first, I thought it was just some guy, maybe broken down or stranded. But then I saw his face, and my blood went cold. It wasn't human. Not entirely. His skin was pale, nearly translucent in the headlights, and his hair was thin and brittle, hanging down in clumps. But what froze me was his eyes. They weren't like the man we saw at the gas station. These were wide and hollow, like black pits that swallowed everything around them. And his mouth, there was something wrong with his mouth. It was too wide, too thin, like it had been stretched out. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stare as he started walking toward us, slowly, deliberately. "Go! Go!" I shouted, my voice coming out in a strangled whisper. Sarah slammed her foot on the gas pedal, and the tires squealed as we tore off down the road. But as we sped away, I could see him in the rearview mirror, standing there, motionless, watching us, his mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. My heart pounded in my chest as we drove on, too scared to speak, too afraid to look back. It wasn't until we reached the next fork in the road that we dared to stop. But the sight of that thing, the figure, the eyes, the twisted grin, still haunted me. We all sat there, silent, listening to the beating of our hearts, unsure if we were just imagining it or if we'd really seen something we weren't supposed to. I thought I saw movement in the trees, and for a moment, I was certain we weren't alone. That's when Sarah spoke. "Maybe we should turn back." I could feel the tension thick in the air as Sarah's words hung between us, but none of us moved. The car sat still at the fork in the road, headlights cutting through the night, illuminating nothing but endless dark desert. Even the wind had stopped, it was like the entire world had gone silent, holding its breath. I glanced at Jake. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "Turn back." "To where?" His voice came out in a hoarse whisper. "We're already lost." I didn't say anything. I knew we were deep in it now, farther off the grid than we'd ever been. No phone signal, no lights for miles. All I could think about was that figure in the rearview mirror, the way he stood there, staring at us with that twisted grin on his face. It felt like he was still out there, lurking just beyond our headlights, waiting for us to make a wrong move. "We need to get out of here," I said, finally breaking the silence. Sarah started the engine, her hands shaking on the wheel. "I thought this was supposed to be fun," she muttered, but there was no enthusiasm in her voice. Just fear. We decided to follow the road ahead, but it felt like it was going on forever. Every time we passed a bend or a curve, it was like the road never ended, just stretching out further into the dark. No signs, no houses, just endless desert. And that feeling, that someone was watching us from the shadows. It wasn't long before we saw something else. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the headlights. But then we saw it again, a figure, far off in the distance, standing motionless by the side of the road. It wasn't a person, it didn't move like one. It was too tall, too still, like something out of a nightmare. "Is that?" Sarah trailed off, her voice barely audible. "Just drive," Jake said, his voice tight, his eyes darting back and forth between the road and the figure. But we couldn't just drive. It was like something was pulling us toward it. The closer we got, the more details started to emerge. The thing wasn't human. It had long, spindly limbs, too long for its body, and its skin was a sickly shade of gray. Its head was too large, disproportionate, with eyes that seemed to glint in the headlights like dark glass. And that mouth, gaping wide, stretching impossibly far across its face, revealing rows of jagged teeth that looked like they'd been carved out of bone. I screamed, and I couldn't stop. I didn't care about Sarah or Jake. I just needed to get away. But then, the car stalled. The engine sputtered, coughing like it was choking, and I felt the cold grip of panic seize me. "What the hell?" I shouted. "I don't know." Sarah cried. She turned the key again, but the engine refused to start. The thing was getting closer, slowly, methodically. Its hollow eyes were locked on us now, and I could hear its breathing, ragged and heavy, like it was inhaling the fear in the air. Jake reached for the door, his hand trembling. "We have to go. Now." I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the figure, the unnatural way it moved, gliding toward us like it was floating above the ground. And then I heard something that made my blood run cold, a low, growling hiss from the creature's throat. It wasn't alone. The ground beneath us seemed to tremble. Another figure, larger than the first, appeared in the distance, stepping out from the dark, the shadows of the desert swallowing it whole as it moved toward us. It was bigger, its features more distorted, and I could see its face now, if you could even call it a face. It was a mess of scars, open wounds, and empty, gaping holes where eyes should have been. "Start the car!" I yelled again, panic rising in my chest. And then, as if someone had answered my prayers, the engine roared back to life. The car jolted forward, and Sarah slammed her foot on the gas, the tires screeching as we tore down the road, away from the creatures. I couldn't tell how long we drove, but we didn't stop until we reached the next town, a small, run-down place with only a few scattered lights. My hands were still shaking as we pulled into the nearest motel. The air felt thick with something that wasn't right, but for the first time in what felt like forever, we were safe, at least, that's what I wanted to believe. But when we checked into the motel, that's when I realized something horrifying. The receptionist, an old man with sunken eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach his lips, looked at us strangely. "You folks just came in from the desert?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Yeah," I said, trying to steady my breathing. He stared at me for a long moment before nodding. "You'll be all right, then. But you should know, don't go off the road around here. People disappear in the desert all the time. There's some things out there, things that follow you." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And that's when I understood, the things we saw in the desert weren't just watching us. They were waiting for us. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing, replaying everything that had happened. The figure by the road, the monstrous thing that followed us, the way the air had turned heavy and oppressive. But it wasn't just the terror of the desert that haunted me, it was the words the old man at the motel had said. "Things that follow you." I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. We weren't supposed to be there. Whatever those things were, they hadn't just been chasing us, they'd been waiting for us to come. The next morning, Sarah was the first to stir. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't gotten a wink of sleep either. Jake was no better. He barely spoke, and when he did, it was in a flat, monotone voice, as if he had already given up. "We should leave," Sarah said, glancing nervously out the window. "We can't stay here." "Yeah, let's just go home," Jake added, his voice tinged with exhaustion. But the thought of going back on that road filled me with dread. That's when I realized something, the road we had driven down didn't feel like it was supposed to be there. There was no reason for it, no real explanation for why it existed in the first place. It didn't make sense. We went outside to the car, ready to hit the road and get the hell out of there. But when we walked up to the vehicle, I stopped dead in my tracks. The tire tracks. They weren't ours. The marks on the dirt were fresh, and they led into the desert. As if someone, or something, had followed us into town. The tracks curved off into the distance, disappearing into the scrub and dust, like they'd been left by a vehicle that wasn't quite like ours. The deep ruts in the ground were uneven, unnatural, too wide for a regular car. I turned around to face Sarah and Jake, my heart racing. "Did either of you see that?" They both froze, eyes wide with realization. We didn't drive in like that," Sarah whispered. We were silent for a long moment, staring at the marks. But that silence was broken by the sound of something moving, rustling in the desert, just beyond the edge of the road. It was a soft shuffle, like footsteps, but far too many of them. I could feel it before I saw it, a presence, something vast and cold, like it was swallowing the light itself. And then, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. There were figures, more than one, standing just at the edge of the desert, barely visible through the dust. Too far to make out clearly, but close enough to know they weren't just shadows or figments of our imagination. They were real. Jake started to back away, his voice shaking. "Let's just go. Now." But before we could even react, something, or someone, spoke. "Leaving already?" The voice was raspy, like dry leaves scraping against stone, and it came from behind us. We turned. The receptionist from the motel was standing at the end of the parking lot, watching us. He wasn't just standing there, he was grinning, his smile wide and jagged, stretched almost grotesquely across his face. "I warned you about the road," he said, his eyes gleaming in the sunlight, glinting like something unnatural. In that moment, I knew he wasn't just some strange old man. He had been part of this. A part of whatever this was. The figures in the desert were moving closer now, slowly. I could hear their footsteps, but they were wrong. They didn't sound like people walking, they sounded like things moving in a rhythm that didn't belong. And then I saw them. Their faces were dark, hollow, and grotesque, stretched too thin, like their skin had been pulled over their bones. Their eyes were empty sockets, black as the void, but I could feel them looking right through me, seeing every corner of my soul. Jake let out a strangled gasp. "What are they?" "They follow you," the receptionist said, his voice low, almost a whisper, like he was speaking to himself. "They always follow. I don't know how we managed to get in the car, but we did." The engine roared to life again, and I didn't look back. We drove out of the parking lot as fast as we could, tires screeching, heart pounding in my chest. But as we pulled onto the main road, I realized something even worse: those figures weren't following us on the ground. They were in the sky. Above us, drifting in and out of the clouds, were dark shapes, bigger than any birds, too large to be anything normal. I could see them now, circling overhead, like vultures, waiting for something. Waiting for us to make our next mistake. I've been on a lot of roads in my life, but none of them felt like this one. None of them made me feel so small, so insignificant. Every mile we drove, it felt like we were running from something that was always just behind us, never far enough to outrun. But we never looked back. We couldn't. It felt like we were trapped in some kind of nightmare, stuck on a loop where every turn brought us closer to something we couldn't understand. The road stretched on, and the car seemed to hum with an unnatural energy, almost as if it knew we were being followed. Every shadow felt like it was watching us. Every passing tree seemed to hide something just out of sight. But it wasn't until we hit the edge of the town that I realized something worse: we were going in circles. The signs along the road, the familiar landmarks, they all felt wrong. We kept passing the same rundown gas station, the same dusty diner, the same cracked pavement that had never been there before. It was like we were driving through a place that didn't exist on any map. "No. This doesn't make sense," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "We've passed that gas station 3 times." I looked out the window, my pulse hammering in my ears. She was right. The same faded sign, the same rusted pumps. It felt like we had never left this place. The sky was still that dull gray, no stars, no moon. Just endless nothing. "We're stuck," Jake muttered, staring out the window with wide, panicked eyes. "We need to turn around," I said, my voice shaky. But as I looked ahead, my heart stopped. There, standing in the middle of the road, was the same man we had seen at the gas station. The one with the pale, lifeless eyes, the one who had stared at us like he was waiting for us to come. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing us. I froze. My foot hovered over the brake, but for some reason, I couldn't make myself stop the car. It was as if some force, some invisible pull, was urging me forward. The closer we got, the more I could feel something deep in my chest, a hollow pit of dread that swallowed every thought. "Don't stop," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But it didn't matter. We weren't in control anymore. The car didn't slow down. It was like we were being pushed, dragged toward him, helpless to do anything about it. The man's eyes never left us, but now I could see the smile. The smile stretched impossibly wide, the same twisted grin we had seen on that thing in the desert. And then, as we got close enough, I saw something I couldn't forget. Behind him, just barely visible in the distance, was something moving. Something huge, darker than the shadows. A massive silhouette rising from the desert, blotting out the stars. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel its presence. It was watching us too, waiting. I slammed my foot on the brake, jerking the car to a stop just inches from the man. We were breathing heavily now, sweat beading on our foreheads, eyes wide, our hearts pounding in terror. The man didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The air around us grew colder, and I heard it, the low, guttural growl, distant yet so close. It was coming from behind us, from the darkness beyond the headlights. "Go!" Jake screamed. "Go! Now!" But before we could move, the man stepped forward, placing his hand on the hood of the car. His fingers weren't human, long and spindly, like they'd been elongated by some twisted force. The moment his hand touched the metal, the engine sputtered, then died completely. The car was frozen. I looked around in a panic. The shadows were closing in. The thing behind us was moving closer. Its shape was no longer a silhouette, it was clearer now. It was huge, towering, the size of a building. Its arms were too long, its legs too bent, and its face, it didn't have a face. Just a blank space where its features should have been. The emptiness stretched out as if it were absorbing the world around it, and with every step it took, the ground seemed to crack beneath it. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. But there was nowhere to go. We were surrounded. The man's grin grew wider, his eyes gleaming with something far worse than malice. "You can't leave," he said in a voice that sounded like it was echoing from the void. "You've already crossed the line." And then, the ground beneath the car began to shift. The road was crumbling, breaking apart, like the world itself was unraveling around us. I didn't know how long we sat there, frozen in place, as the thing in the distance slowly moved toward us. Its presence felt like it was suffocating the air, pressing down on everything, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "What does he mean, we crossed the line?" But there was no time to answer. The thing was almost on us now. Its form was no longer just a silhouette, but something worse, something monstrous, ancient, something that should never have existed. Its eyes, empty, vast, consuming, looked directly at me. And I knew, without a doubt, that it wasn't just following us. It was hunting us. The air was thick with the smell of decay, like the desert had turned into something else entirely, something dead. My breath caught in my throat as I looked up at the creature. It was no longer just a shadow. It was real, towering above us, blotting out everything. There were no eyes, no face. It was a massive shape, an empty void that swallowed light itself, and it felt like it was pulling everything into its darkness. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My hands were shaking, the cold sweat running down my spine as I desperately searched for an escape. But there was nowhere to go. The desert stretched endlessly behind us, an ocean of nothingness. The car was stuck, and the world was closing in. Jake was the first to move. "Get out!" he shouted, his voice raw with panic. He yanked at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The thing was too close now. Its presence was suffocating. I could feel it pressing in on us, like 1,000 invisible hands trying to crush the life out of us. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding in my ears, and all I could think was, we're going to die here. But then, just as the creature reached out with one of its impossibly long, twisted arms, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just sit there. We couldn't just give up. I didn't know why I thought it would work, but I slammed my fist into the steering wheel, desperate. And then, the car moved. It was like the world shifted. The creature faltered, a horrible screech echoing in the air, like it was in pain. The car jolted forward, and suddenly we were moving again. The engine roared back to life, sputtering and coughing, but it was moving, we were moving. Go! I yelled. Drive! Sarah's hands were trembling on the wheel, but she slammed the gas pedal to the floor, and the car shot forward, tearing down the road faster than I'd ever seen it move. Behind us, the creature screamed, its voice like the sound of bones breaking, of the world being torn apart. We didn't dare look back. The road stretched ahead of us, but this time it didn't feel endless. It felt like it was leading somewhere far away from what we had just escaped. The car surged forward, and soon, I could see lights in the distance. It was a town. A real town. A place we could be safe. Just keep going, Jake muttered, his eyes glued to the road. His voice was shaky, but he was gripping the seat like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. We didn't stop until we hit the town, a small, sleepy place nestled at the edge of the desert. We found a motel, but we didn't care anymore about staying in some rundown place. We just needed to put distance between us and whatever we had left behind. That night, we locked ourselves in our rooms, too afraid to speak. The silence was suffocating, but we were alive. For now, that was enough. I kept hearing the sound of that creature's growl in my mind, the image of its endless, empty face. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, standing in the distance, waiting for us to slip up, waiting for us to make the wrong move again. It wasn't until the morning that I saw it, the thing that confirmed what I had been afraid of. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath, trying to shake the terror from my bones. But when I looked down the street, I saw something that froze me in place. There, standing just at the edge of the desert, was the man, the one from the gas station. His pale eyes locked on mine, and his twisted grin stretched wider. He hadn't moved. He was still there, waiting. And in that moment, I knew. We weren't free. We had only just begun to run. Did you like these stories? Write in the comments. And please write what you didn't like. It will be useful for me to know your opinion. And I will improve my work. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell so as not to miss new stories. I try for you.